I never imagined that the same conference room where I once led negotiations worth millions would become the place where I was reduced to nothing. At 65, I thought I had earned something permanent, respect, if nothing else. I had spent over 2 decades building a company from the ground up with my husband. Brick by brick, contract by contract, we turned it into something real, something lasting. Or, at least, I believed it would last. Now I sat at the far end of the table, hands folded in my lap like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. My son, Daniel, stood at the head of the room, nervously clicking through a presentation he barely understood. His voice wavered as he explained numbers that used to live effortlessly in my mind. I knew exactly where he was going wrong. Every slide, every projection, every misplaced assumption. I could feel it like a musician hearing a wrong note in a symphony. But I stayed silent, because this was no longer my company. At least, that's what I had told myself for the past 2 years. After my husband passed away, I stepped back. I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. Daniel needed to grow into his role. He needed space. And I didn't have the strength to fight grief and business at the same time. So I handed everything over. And now I was watching it slowly fall apart. Across from me sat Clara, my daughter-in-law. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect confidence. She looked like she belonged in a business magazine, not because of what she'd built, but because of how effortlessly she carried herself. She didn't notice the cracks in Daniel's presentation. Or maybe she did, and didn't care. One of the investors leaned forward. Can you explain the risks in these international projections? Daniel hesitated, just slightly. But I saw it. The room saw it. His eyes flicked toward Clara. She gave him a small nod, as if handing him permission to continue. He tried, but it wasn't enough. His answer was vague, uncertain, incomplete. Before I even realized it, I shifted in my chair. A reflex. Old instincts waking up. Those regions aren't as stable as they used to be, I said calmly. Regulations have tightened. The margins you're expecting are... Excuse me. Clara's voice cut through mine like glass. The room went still. She stood slowly, turning toward me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. This is a professional meeting, she said. We don't need outdated commentary. Outdated. The word landed heavier than I expected. I was just clarifying. I began. She laughed. Not loudly, but sharply enough that everyone heard it. If you want to help, she said, her tone turning cold, maybe you can do something more appropriate. I felt my chest tighten. Like what? I asked quietly. Her eyes scanned me, my hands, my posture, my age. Then she said it. Go clean the restroom, Amelia. That's more your speed. Silence. Not the kind that fades quickly. The kind that stretches and suffocates. No one spoke. Not the investors. Not the staff. Not even my son. I looked at Daniel, waiting. Just one word. One sentence. Anything. But he didn't defend me. He just sat there, frozen, caught between discomfort and fear. That hurt more than Clara's words ever could. I stood up slowly. My legs didn't feel like mine. I didn't mean to interrupt, I said, though my voice barely sounded like my own. Clara had already turned away, smiling brightly at the investors again. As I was saying, she continued smoothly. Our future strategy. I didn't hear the rest. I walked out. Each step echoed louder than it should have. The hallway felt longer than I remembered, lined with framed photos of milestones I had helped create. There I was cutting ribbons, shaking hands, smiling beside my husband, proof that I had once mattered. By the time I reached the parking lot, I couldn't hold it in anymore. The tears came all at once. Not quiet, not controlled, raw. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to understand what had just happened. When did I become invisible? When did everything I built stop belonging to me? When did my own life become something I had to watch from the sidelines? I drove home without turning on the radio. The house felt colder than usual when I stepped inside.
Too quiet.
Too empty. It used to feel like a reward. Now it felt like a museum. I walked into the kitchen and stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Eventually, I made tea out of habit, though I didn't really want it. My reflection in the window caught my eye. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. Tired. Smaller somehow, as if she had been slowly folding into herself for years. Wrinkled old woman. Clara's voice echoed again. I clenched my jaw. Maybe she was right. Maybe the world had moved on. Maybe I had stayed too long. Maybe.
No.
Something shifted in my chest. A feeling I hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't grief. It was something sharper. Something colder. I turned away from the window and walked down the hallway toward a door I hadn't opened in months. My husband's study. The air inside still carried traces of him. Books, papers, the faint scent of old leather. I hesitated, then stepped in. If I was going to disappear, I needed to understand when it started.
And why?
That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what had happened in that conference room. Clara's voice echoed the loudest, but it wasn't just her words that kept me awake. It was Daniel's silence. That silence had weight. It pressed against my chest, heavier than grief ever had. Losing my husband had been pain, yes, but it had been honest pain. This felt like erasure. By morning, I gave up trying to rest. I made coffee and stood in the kitchen, watching the sky slowly lighten. The house felt different now, not just empty, but accusing. Every wall held memories of a life where I had purpose, direction, authority. Now I drifted through it like a visitor. I took my cup and walked back to the study. I hadn't allowed myself to sit there since the funeral, as if avoiding the room could somehow preserve what I had lost. But something inside me had shifted, and I knew I couldn't keep avoiding it. Not if I wanted answers. The chair behind the desk still had the faint imprint of him. I ran my fingers along the wood, then slowly sat down. It felt strange at first, like stepping into someone else's role, but after a moment, something familiar settled over me. I opened the cabinet beside the desk, pulling out folders I hadn't touched in years. Old contracts, international agreements, letters, photographs, a lifetime of work compressed into paper and ink. The first file I opened stopped my breath. North Africa Infrastructure Project. I remembered it instantly. Heat that never seemed to fade, negotiations that stretched late into the night, the constant balancing act between cultural respect and business precision. Inside were documents in multiple languages: English, French, Arabic. My handwriting was in the margins, notes, corrections, strategy, adjustments. I traced one line with my finger and felt something stir inside me. I used to think like this all the time. Sharp, focused,
alive.
I flipped through more pages, faster now. There were photos tucked between contracts, me standing beside engineers, laughing with local partners, pointing at blueprints with confidence. In every image I looked certain, like I belonged exactly where I was. I barely recognized that woman. "What happened to you?" I whispered. The question hung in the air, but I already knew the answer. I let myself disappear. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Slowly. Quietly. After my husband got sick, everything else became secondary. The company, the deals, the decisions, they all faded behind hospital visits and long nights and the constant fear of losing him. And when I did lose him, I didn't just lose a partner. I lost the version of myself that existed beside him. So I stepped back. I told myself it was temporary. Then it became permanent. I kept going through the files. Each one felt like unlocking a part of my own mind that had been sealed away. There were projects Daniel didn't even know existed. Partnerships built over decades. Contacts across continents. Names that still carried weight in industries he barely understood. And suddenly, something uncomfortable settled in my chest. The company hadn't just been built by us. It had been carried by knowledge, by relationships, by experience. And I had taken all of that and hidden it from my own son. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen. Daniel. I hesitated before answering. Hello. Mom. His voice sounded strained. About yesterday. I waited. He sighed. Clara didn't mean it like that. She was just under pressure. I closed my eyes for a moment. Under pressure? I repeated quietly. I walked out of the study with purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first time since my husband's death, I didn't feel like I was drifting. I felt like I was returning. I arrived earlier than I needed to, but I didn't go inside right away. Instead, I sat in my car across the street, watching the building that still carried the name I had helped create. From the outside, nothing had changed. Same glass facade, same polished entrance, same quiet authority. But I knew better. Structures don't collapse all at once. They weaken quietly from within until one day, even a small pressure is enough to bring everything down. I checked the time. 20 minutes until the meeting. Clara had made it clear I wasn't welcome, but that didn't mean I had to obey. Not anymore. Not after what I had remembered. Not after what I had realized sitting in that study surrounded by the life I had abandoned. I stepped out of the car and crossed the street. The lobby felt familiar, but different in a way I couldn't quite explain. Maybe it was the way people looked at me now, polite, distant, unsure. Before, I had walked through these doors, and people moved with purpose around me. Now I was just another figure passing through. Mrs. Hale, the receptionist said, surprised. I gave a small nod. Good morning. I didn't know you'd be coming in today. Neither did I replied. I didn't wait for questions. I headed toward the elevator, my reflection briefly catching in the mirrored walls. For a moment, I studied myself, posture straighter than yesterday, eyes more focused. Not the same woman as before, but not the one Clara had tried to reduce me to either. On the second floor, I didn't go toward the conference room immediately. Instead, I took the side corridor, the one most people forgot existed. It ran parallel to the main meeting space, separated by a thin wall and a storage room that used to hold archived files. I remembered it because I had designed that layout myself years ago, insisting on practical access points for maintenance and privacy. Funny how the details you create end up serving you later. The storage room door was unlocked. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and cleaning supplies. I stepped carefully around stacked boxes and positioned myself near the wall closest to the conference room. Voices filtered through, muffled, but clear enough. Strong growth potential, Clara was saying, her tone polished and confident. We're shifting focus toward high-end developments, modernizing the company's direction. Modernizing. I closed my eyes briefly. Then a different voice answered.
Calm.
Controlled. Measured. And the foundation that built your reputation? There was something in that voice, something familiar in its cadence, in the way each word was placed with intention. Clara hesitated, just slightly. The company is evolving. We can't remain tied to outdated sectors. Outdated again. A small pause followed. Then the man spoke again. Outdated or misunderstood? My grip tightened slightly against the shelf beside me. Daniel jumped in, his voice uncertain. We're focusing on future profitability. I see, the man said. And the past profitability? No answer. Silence stretched. I could almost picture the room. The investors shifting slightly, Clara maintaining her composure, Daniel trying to follow her lead. Then the man continued, softer this time. I became interested in your company because of its work abroad. Infrastructure projects, long-term partnerships, reliability under difficult conditions. My heart skipped. He wasn't here for Clara's plans. He was here for the company I had built. Those were years ago, Clara said quickly. Different leadership. Different leadership. That was how she erased me. And the people responsible for that work? He asked. They're no longer involved, she replied. I felt something cold settle in my chest. No longer involved. That was how easily I had been written out. Not involved, he repeated slowly. Or not invited? No one answered. I leaned closer to the wall, barely breathing now. Experience like that doesn't disappear, he continued. It doesn't become irrelevant overnight. Clara's tone sharpened. With respect, we're focused on the present. We have new strategies, new leadership. And yet, he interrupted gently, you cannot answer my questions about the very work that made your company worth noticing. Silence again. He wasn't raising his voice. He didn't need to. Daniel tried to recover. We can provide any data you need. I'm not asking for data, the man said. I'm asking for understanding. That landed. Hard. I felt it even from behind the wall. There was a shift in the room, a subtle change in energy that comes when someone realizes they are no longer in control of a conversation. I'd like to speak with someone who is directly involved in those projects, the man added. My breath caught. Clara responded immediately. That won't be possible. Why not? They're retired, she said, her voice tight now. And not up to date with current practices. Not up to date. I almost laughed. Instead, I stayed still. The man didn't speak for a moment. When he finally did, his voice was different. Colder. I see. And just like that, I knew. The meeting was over. Not officially, but effectively. Chairs shifted. Papers moved. Polite words would follow, but the decision had already been made. I stepped back from the wall just as footsteps approached the conference room door. I moved quickly, slipping out of the storage room and down the side hallway, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. By the time I reached the lobby, the first of the visitors were already leaving. Then I saw him. He walked with quiet confidence, surrounded by two associates, but not hidden behind them. Taller than I expected. Composed. Every movement deliberate. His hair was darker than I remembered, but touched with silver at the edges. Time had refined him, not softened him. For a moment he turned his head. Our eyes met, and something flickered there. Recognition? Or curiosity? I couldn't be sure, but I felt it, a connection that hadn't fully disappeared. Then one of his associates spoke to him, and he turned away, continuing toward the exit. The doors opened, and he was gone. Just like that. I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the empty space where he had been. Kare malnasar. Now I remembered. Not clearly, not completely, but enough. Years ago, during one of our international projects, there had been a young engineer, observant, quiet, always asking questions that went deeper than the obvious. He had stayed late, worked harder than required, and listened more than he spoke. My husband had liked him. I had trusted him. And now, he had returned. Not for Clara, not for Daniel, for something they didn't even realize they had lost. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Meeting didn't go well. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, then looked back toward the exit. They had already lost him, but I hadn't. Not yet. For the first time since yesterday, I felt something clear and undeniable. Opportunity. I turned and walked out of the building, not slowly this time, not uncertain. Decisively. If they couldn't speak his language, business, experience, memory, then I would. And this time, I wouldn't ask for permission. I didn't go home. Instead, I sat in my car with the engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, replaying everything I had just heard. The meeting had confirmed what I already suspected. Daniel and Clara weren't just struggling, they were misrepresenting the very foundation of the company. And worse, they didn't even realize it. They were speaking a language of numbers and trends, while Kareem had come looking for something far more valuable: memory, trust, experience. And I had all three. The question wasn't whether I should act. The question was whether I still could. I looked at the time. It was just past 3 in the afternoon. If he was flying out soon, I didn't have much time. People like Kareem didn't linger after making decisions. They moved forward. Efficient. Final. Unless given a reason not to. I started the engine. The drive felt different from earlier, not hesitant, not uncertain. Focused. Every turn, every stoplight felt like part of a path I had finally decided to follow. By the time I reached the hotel district, my mind was already working through possibilities. What to say, what not to say, how to position myself, not as a desperate outsider, but as what I truly was. Essential. The hotel was exactly what I expected. Quiet luxury, discreet efficiency. The kind of place where important conversations happen behind closed doors, away from unnecessary attention. I walked through the lobby without hesitation, my heels echoing softly against polished marble. At the reception desk, I paused. "I'd like to be connected to Mr. Kareem Al Nasser," I said. The receptionist hesitated for only a second, trained well enough not to question confidence. "1 moment, please." I waited. Every second stretched longer than it should have. Then a voice answered. "Mr. Al Nasser's suite." "This is Amelia," I said. "From Hale Industries. I'd like to speak with him." A pause. Muffled voices in the background. Then footsteps. And finally, Amelia. His voice.
Come.
Recognizing. Not surprised. "I wasn't expecting your call," he said. "I imagine you weren't expecting a lot of things today," I replied. A brief silence. Not awkward. Measured. "I have a full schedule," he said. "What exactly is this regarding?" "Yesterday," I said. "And what you didn't find in that room." Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost feel him thinking. "5 minutes," he said finally. "Downstairs. Restaurant. I'll be there." The line went dead. I exhaled slowly, only then realizing I had been holding my breath. 5 minutes. That was all I had been given. I straightened my posture and walked toward the restaurant. He was already there. Of course he was. Sitting at a corner table, reviewing something on a tablet, completely at ease. Not rushed. Not distracted. When he looked up and saw me approaching, he stood, just slightly, enough to acknowledge respect without turning it into a formality. "Amelia," he said. "Kareem." We shook hands. His grip was firm, confident, the same as I remembered, only steadier. We sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He studied me, not rudely, not skeptically, but carefully, as if trying to match who I was now with who he remembered. "You've changed," he said. "So have you," I replied. A faint smile touched his expression. "That's usually how time works." "I wasn't referring to time," I said. That earned a slightly more interested look. "Then what were you referring to?" "Perspective." That was enough to shift the conversation. He set his tablet aside. 5 minutes, he reminded me. "Then I won't waste them," I said. I leaned forward slightly, not aggressively, but with intention. "You didn't come to that meeting for projections," I said. "You came for continuity." He didn't respond, but He didn't interrupt either. You came because you remembered what this company used to be, I continued. What it represented. Reliability. Execution. Trust built over time.
His eyes narrowed slightly.
Go on. What you saw instead, I said, was a version of the company trying to reinvent itself without understanding what made it valuable in the first place. A pause. Then he asked quietly, "And you do?" I held his gaze. "I built it." Silence. Not disbelief. Evaluation. "You weren't present in that meeting," he said. "I was," I replied. "Just not where they wanted me." That seemed to interest him. "Then you heard everything." "Enough," I said. He leaned back slightly in his chair. "And yet you chose to approach me now," he said. "Why?" "Because you're about to walk away," I answered. "And you'd be making that decision based on incomplete information." He tilted his head slightly. "Or accurate information." "No," I said calmly. "Filtered information." That landed. I could see it. He tapped his fingers lightly against the table. "Then tell me," he said, "what exactly was filtered out?" I didn't rush my answer. This was the moment. Context, I said. History. Relationships that don't exist on spreadsheets. Knowledge that isn't written in reports. He watched me closely now. More engaged. More present. "You're describing intangible assets," he said. "I'm describing the reason you came here in the first place." Silence again. Then, "You're assuming a lot," he said.
"I'm remembering. I corrected."
That word changed everything. His expression shifted. Subtle, but undeniable. "You remember me," he said. "Yes," I replied. "From when?" "From when you asked too many questions and refused to accept surface-level answers," I said. "From when you stayed on site longer than anyone expected. From when you cared more about understanding the work than impressing the people in charge." His eyes held mine. Recognition.
"Clear now."
"You were there," he said slowly. "I was more than there," I said. "I was the one answering those questions." That was the moment. The exact moment. When everything aligned.
His posture changed.
Not dramatically, but enough.
Respect.
Not given lightly. Earned. "I was told," he said carefully, "that the people responsible for those projects were no longer involved." "I was told the same thing," I replied. That almost made him smile. Almost. "And that's not true," he said. "No," I said. "It's just convenient." A longer silence followed. Not empty. Thoughtful. Then he asked, "Why now?" I didn't pretend not to understand. "Why speak up now?" he clarified. I exhaled slowly. "Because yesterday," I said, "I realized that stepping aside didn't preserve anything. It just made it easier for the wrong people to redefine it." That was the truth. Simple. Unpolished.
Real.
He studied me for a long moment. Then, finally, "5 minutes is not enough," he said. I allowed myself the smallest hint of a smile. I didn't think it would be. He glanced at his watch. Then back at me. "Stay," he said. "We'll continue this conversation." And just like that, everything changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. For the first time since that conference room, I wasn't invisible anymore. I stayed. Not because he told me to, but because I finally understood that leaving again would mean repeating the same mistake I had made 2 years ago. Back then, I had stepped away thinking I was giving space, creating room for the next generation to grow. In reality, I had created a vacuum. And vacuums don't stay empty. They get filled, often by the wrong people, with the wrong priorities. Kareem signaled to the waiter, ordered something light without even looking at the menu, then turned his attention fully back to me. That shift alone told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't here for small talk. He wasn't entertaining curiosity. He was evaluating. So, he said, folding his hands calmly on the table, if I were to ignore what I saw yesterday, what would you want me to understand instead? I didn't answer immediately. Not because I didn't know, but because I knew this wasn't a moment for rushing. The difference between speaking and being heard often comes down to timing. You're looking at a company that appears confused, I said finally. But confusion isn't the problem. Disconnection is. He didn't interrupt. Leadership changed, I continued. But the knowledge didn't transfer. The relationships weren't maintained. And the people who understood how everything fit together stepped away. You're referring to yourself, he said. Yes, I replied simply.
No modesty. No apology.
Just truth. And you believe your involvement would change the trajectory of the company? I know it would. That answer hung between us, not arrogant, not defensive. Just certain. He studied me again, longer this time, as if trying to measure whether that certainty was justified or simply practiced. Confidence is easy to claim, he said. Results are harder to prove. I nodded slightly. Then, let's talk about results. I leaned forward, resting my hands lightly on the table. You asked about international projects yesterday. The ones Clara dismissed as outdated. Let me give you context instead of percentages. We didn't just complete those projects. We adapted to environments most companies failed in. Regulations changed mid-construction. Supply chains collapsed. Governments shifted priorities overnight. And yet we delivered. Not because we had perfect plans, but because we understood how to navigate uncertainty. His eyes sharpened slightly. That kind of adaptability, I continued, doesn't come from theory. It comes from experience. And that experience still exists? He asked. Yes. In the company? In me. There it was.
Clear.
Unavoidable. He leaned back slightly, considering that. You're asking me to separate the company from its current leadership, he said. I'm asking you to recognize that what you came for still exists, just not where you were told to look. Silence. Then he asked something I hadn't fully expected. Why didn't you stay involved? The question was simple, but the answer wasn't. For a long time, I said slowly, I thought stepping back was the responsible thing to do. My husband passed away. My son needed space to grow into his role. I didn't want to interfere. And now I realize I didn't interfere when I should have. That was the truth.
No excuses. No dramatics.
Just clarity. He nodded slightly, as if that answer fit into something he already understood. Yesterday, he said, your daughter-in-law made it clear she believes the future lies in restructuring, divesting from certain areas, moving into higher-margin sectors. Yes, I said. You disagree. I disagree with how she's approaching it. Explain. I took a breath. Profit margins don't exist in isolation, I said. They depend on stability, reputation, execution. You can chase higher returns, but if you don't have the foundation to support that shift, you're not building, you're gambling. And you believe that's what she's doing. I know that's what she's doing. He watched me closely. And your son? That question was harder. He's trying, I said. But trying isn't enough when you're leading something this complex. He's relying on someone who sounds confident instead of someone who understands the system. And you're the one who understands it. Yes. Again, no hesitation. He exhaled slowly, tapping his fingers once against the table. Let's assume, he said, that everything you're saying is accurate. That the company still has the capability I'm looking for. That you are, in fact, the missing link between its past and its potential future. He paused. Why should I trust you? Fair question. Necessary question. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I shifted slightly in my seat and said, because you already have. That caught him off guard, just enough to be noticeable.
What do you mean, he asked.
I switched languages. Fluently. Naturally. The same one we had both used years ago on construction sites, in negotiations, in conversations that required more than translation, they required understanding. His reaction was immediate, subtle, but unmistakable. Recognition. Memory. Connection. I continued speaking for a few seconds, not testing him, not proving anything, just reminding him of something real. Then I switched back to English. You trusted me then, I said. Not because of a title, not because of a presentation, but because I knew what I was doing. The silence that followed was different from the others.
Deeper.
He wasn't evaluating anymore. He was remembering. I wasn't expecting that, he said quietly. I know. You didn't mention this in the meeting. I wasn't given the chance. That sat heavily between us. Finally, he nodded slowly. That explains a lot. Yes, I said. It does. The waiter returned briefly, placing plates on the table, but neither of us paid much attention. This conversation had moved beyond anything external. You're right about one thing, he said after a moment. I didn't come here for projections. I came because of what I remembered. And yesterday, I thought that no longer existed. And now? I asked. Now he looked directly at me. Now I'm reconsidering. Not a promise. Not yet. But not a rejection either. Which meant one thing. There was still a chance. I'm not interested in partial solutions, he continued. If I move forward, I need clarity, structure, accountability. You'll have it, I said. From you? Yes. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, that would require you to return. I didn't look away. I already have. That answer seemed to settle something. Not everything, but enough. He reached for his glass, took a slow sip, then placed it back down. I'll consider a different approach, he said. But it will come with conditions. I expected that. And they won't be negotiable. I wouldn't expect them to be. A pause. Then, good, he said. Because for the first time since this entire situation began, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was leading. I didn't interrupt him when he said there would be conditions. I expected it. Men like Kareem didn't move based on emotion, even when memory played a role. They moved based on structure, control, and certainty. And if I wanted him to reconsider walking away, I had to accept that whatever came next wouldn't be comfortable, it would be decisive. He leaned forward slightly, his tone no longer exploratory but defined. If I move forward with your company, he said, it will not be under the current structure. I nodded once. That's fair. No, he said calmly. It's necessary. There was a difference. I didn't argue. What exactly does that mean? I asked. It means I need direct alignment with the person who understands the operations at the level I require, he replied. Not filtered through assumptions. Not translated through inexperience. In other words, I said, you won't deal through Clara. His expression didn't change. I will deal with whoever is capable, he said. That was answer enough. And you believe that's me? I said. I believe, he corrected, that you might be. I appreciated that. Certainty without verification is arrogance. And he wasn't arrogant. He was precise. What would you need to confirm that? I asked. Control, he said simply. That word settled heavily between us. Define it, I said. I would require you to take an active leadership role in any project we engage in, he continued. Not advisory. Not symbolic. Operational. I didn't hesitate. Done. He watched me carefully. You haven't heard the rest. I don't need to, I said. If I'm involved fully. That seemed to interest him more than any prepared answer would have. Most people ask for details first, he said. Most people are afraid of commitment, I replied. A faint shift in his expression. Approval. Perhaps. Very well, he said. Then here are the terms. I sat back slightly, not out of caution, but to listen without interruption. A multi-year partnership, he said. 3 major projects to start. Infrastructure. Long-term contracts. High accountability. High visibility. That alone was significant. But I knew that wasn't the real condition. And I prompted. And, he continued, you will be the point of execution. Not your son. Not your daughter-in-law. You. There it was.
Clear. Non negociable.
The room felt quieter somehow, as if the air itself had shifted. That won't be an easy transition, I said. I'm not interested in easy, he replied. Of course he wasn't. And if they refuse? I asked. Then I walk away. Simple. Final. I looked at him, measuring not the words, but the certainty behind them. You're asking me to step back into a position I gave up, I said. I'm asking you to step into the position you never should have left, he corrected. That landed deeper than anything else he had said, because he wasn't entirely wrong. I had convinced myself that stepping away was strength. In reality, it had been avoidance. I'll need to speak with them, I said. Of course, he replied. But understand this. This is not a negotiation between you and me. It's a decision between you and them. I knew that too. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of that conversation. Anything else? I asked.
One more thing, he said.
I waited. I don't invest in instability. I tilted my head slightly. Meaning? Meaning I need to know that once you step back in, you won't step out again, he said.
No hesitation. No withdrawal.
No disappearing when it becomes difficult. That was fair. More than fair. It was accurate. I won't, I said. How can you be certain? He asked. I held his gaze. Because I already know what happens when I do. Silence. Then, good, he said quietly. That was it. Not dramatic. Not exaggerated. Just settled. The framework was clear now. Opportunity, massive, undeniable, stood directly in front of me. But it came with a price. Not financial. Not technical. Personal. I finished my coffee, though I barely remembered drinking it. When do you need an answer? I asked. Tomorrow, he said. I leave in the morning. Of course he did. Decisive. Efficient. No room for hesitation. I'll have it before then, I said. I expect you will. We stood at the same time.
No ruse. No cuernis.
Just mutual understanding. Amelia, he said as we shook hands again, whatever you decide, make sure it's your decision. Not Daniel's. Not Clara's.
Mine.
I will, I said. And for the first time, I meant it completely. I left the hotel with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The world outside seemed sharper somehow, sounds more defined, movement more precise. Not because anything had changed out there, but because something had finally aligned inside me. This wasn't about proving Clara wrong. It wasn't about reclaiming status. It wasn't even about saving the company. It was about correcting a mistake. My mistake. I had walked away from something I understood better than anyone else. And now I had the chance to step back in. But this time, there would be no stepping out again. I got into my car and sat there for a moment before starting the engine. The conversation ahead replayed in my mind. Daniel would hesitate. Clara would resist. Not because they were incapable of understanding, but because this would force them to confront something uncomfortable. That they weren't ready. And that I was. I started the car. Drove back toward the building. Not as a visitor this time. Not as someone uncertain of her place. But as someone who already knew the outcome. The only question left was whether they would accept it or fight it. Either way, I wasn't walking away again. I didn't call ahead. There was no reason to. Some conversations shouldn't be prepared for, they should be faced. By the time I walked back into the building, the late afternoon light was already fading through the glass walls. The office felt quieter than usual, but not calm. There was tension in the air, the kind that lingers after something goes wrong, and no one quite knows how to fix it. The receptionist looked up again, this time less surprised. "Mrs. Hale, you're back." "Yes," I said simply. I didn't explain. I didn't need to. I walked straight to the elevator. My reflection steady this time. No hesitation, no second-guessing. Whatever happened next, I already knew one thing. I was done asking for permission to exist in a place I had built. The conference room door was closed. Voices inside.
Raised.
I paused for only a second before opening it. Daniel and Clara both turned immediately. The tension snapped into silence. "Mom." Daniel started, but stopped when he saw my expression. Clara didn't even try to hide her irritation. "I thought we made it clear you shouldn't be interfering," she said. I closed the door behind me. Slowly, deliberately. "I'm not interfering," I said.
"I'm correcting."
That stopped her. Not completely, but enough. Daniel looked between us, already uncomfortable. "What's going on?" he asked. I didn't sit. I stayed standing, hands relaxed at my sides, not defensive, not aggressive.
"Certain."
"I met with Kareem," I said. The reaction was immediate. Clara's eyes narrowed. Daniel leaned forward. "You what?" he said. He agreed to reconsider. I continued. Clara let out a short, sharp laugh. "That's impossible," she said. He walked out. "Yes," I said, "because of what you said." Her expression hardened. I was professional.
"No," he replied calmly.
"You were dismissive." Daniel raised a hand slightly. Can we focus on what happened now?" I nodded.
"Fine," I said.
"Here's what happened. He's willing to move forward. Multi-year partnership. Large-scale projects. Enough to stabilize and grow the company beyond where it's been in years." Daniel stared at me. Clara didn't move. "And," she said, "there's a condition." That word shifted everything. Daniel straightened. Clara crossed her arms. "What kind of condition?" he asked. I held his gaze. "He will only move forward if I take operational control of the projects." Silence. Not the brief kind. The heavy kind. The kind that forces truth into the room whether anyone wants it or not. Clara was the first to react. "No," she said immediately. Daniel blinked. "Wait. What does that mean exactly?" "It means," I said, still calm, "I step back into leadership. Not symbolically. Not partially. Fully." "That's not happening," Clara said. I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Daniel. "He leaves tomorrow," I continued. "If we don't accept, the opportunity is gone." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "This is a lot." "Yes," I said. "It is." Clara stepped forward slightly. "This is manipulation," she said. "He's using you to control the company." I turned to her then. "No," I said. "He's choosing competence." That hit. Hard. Her jaw tightened. "You're saying I'm incompetent?" "I'm saying," I replied evenly, "you don't understand the business you're trying to transform." "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "I have more formal training then. Training isn't execution." I cut in. The room went still. Daniel looked at me like he had never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Clara took a breath, clearly trying to regain control. "We have a strategy," she said. "A clear direction. Expansion, higher margins, modern positioning." "You have a plan," I corrected. "Not a foundation." "That's your opinion." "No," I said. "That's the reality you saw this afternoon when he walked out." Silence again. Daniel looked down at the table. "He did walk out," he said quietly. Clara didn't respond. I stepped closer. Not aggressively, but enough to make my presence undeniable. You're not wrong to want growth, I said to her, but you're trying to build on something you don't fully understand. And when someone came in asking about that foundation, you dismissed it. I didn't dismiss it, she said. You called it outdated. She didn't answer, because she couldn't. I turned back to Daniel. You asked me once how to fix this, I said. This is how. He looked up slowly. You're asking me to step aside, he said.
No, Iraplia.
I'm asking you to step into a role you can actually grow into. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? It means you don't have to carry this alone, I said. It means you learn.
Properly.
Not through pressure, not through guesswork, but through experience. And her? He asked, glancing at Clara. I didn't hesitate. She stays, I said, but in an area she actually understands. Clara let out a quiet, disbelieving breath. You're restructuring everything, she said.
No, Iraplia.
I'm stabilizing it. Daniel leaned back in his chair, processing everything. The numbers, the risk, the reality. What happens if we say no? He asked finally. I didn't soften the answer. He walks away, I said. And we continue exactly as we are. And that means... I held his gaze. You run out of time. The words settled into the room like weight. Clara looked at Daniel now. Not confident, not certain, waiting. For him. For the first time, it wasn't her leading. It was him deciding. I need to think, he said quietly. You don't have long, I replied. I know. I stepped back slightly, giving him space, but not distance. I'm not here to take anything from you, I said. I'm here because you're about to lose everything. That was the truth. Simple. Unavoidable. Daniel looked at me again, and this time there was something different in his expression. Not resistance. Not confusion. Recognition. Of what I was. Of what I had always been. Mom, he said, voice lower now, if we do this, you're not stepping back again, are you? I shook my head. No, I said. Not this time. Another silence. But this one wasn't tense. It was transitional. Something shifting.
Slowly.
I turned toward the door. I'll give you space to decide, I said. Clara didn't stop me. Daniel didn't call after me. Because they both knew this wasn't a discussion anymore.
It was a choice.
And for the first time in years, I wasn't the one waiting to be chosen. The call came late. Later than I expected, but not later than it needed to. I was back in the study when it happened, sitting in the same chair where everything had begun to shift just days ago. The room didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a control center again, alive with purpose, filled with decisions waiting to be made instead of memories waiting to be preserved. When my phone lit up with Daniel's name, I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring once.
Twice.
Not as a game, but as a moment. A boundary. Then I picked up. Amelia, he said.
Not, Mom.
Not this time. And strangely, that didn't hurt. It meant something had changed. Yes, I replied. A pause. Then, we accept. Simple.
Clear.
Final. I closed my eyes for a second, letting that settle. Everything? I asked. Yes, he said. His conditions. Your role. All of it. And Clara? I asked. Another pause. Longer this time. She doesn't agree with everything, he admitted. But she understands the numbers now. She understands what we're risking if we don't move forward. That was enough. Agreement wasn't required. Reality was.
Good, I said.
There was something else in his voice now. Not just relief. Something quieter. I should have listened sooner, he said. I didn't correct him. Didn't comfort him. Didn't dismiss it. Maybe, I said. But you're listening now. And that mattered more. We need you tomorrow, he added. He's coming in to finalize everything before he leaves. I'll be there. After the call ended, I didn't move right away. I sat there in silence, absorbing the weight of what had just happened. Not the deal. Not the numbers. The shift. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't outside the story anymore. I was back in it. The next morning, I dressed with intention. Not to impress. Not to prove anything. But to reflect exactly what I was stepping into. Control.
Clarity.
Presence. When I walked into the office, the atmosphere was different immediately. People noticed. Not in the way they had before, with polite uncertainty, but with recognition. Not just of who I was, but of what I represented. Structure. Direction.
Stability.
Daniel was already in the conference room when I entered.
He stood when he saw me.
Not out of habit. Out of respect. You're early, he said. So are you, I replied. That earned a small, nervous smile. Clara was there too. Composed as always, but quieter. Observing instead of leading. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Kareem arrived exactly on time.
No dilas. No teatrix.
Just presence. When he walked into the room, his attention moved immediately to me. Not dismissing the others, but prioritizing. Amelia, he said. Kareem. We shook hands again. This time, it wasn't an introduction. It was confirmation. We all sat. The conversation began quickly. Terms, timelines, structures. It was detailed, precise, and demanding. The kind of discussion that exposed weaknesses immediately if they existed. Clara contributed where she could. Daniel listened more than he spoke. And I operated. Not as someone returning, but as someone who had never left. We moved through logistics, risk assessments, resource allocation. Kareem didn't simplify anything. He didn't adjust the complexity to make it easier. He expected alignment. And for the first time in a long time, there was alignment. At one point, he shifted the conversation. There is one more matter, he said. Clara straightened slightly. Daniel looked up. I stayed still. The manufacturing division, he continued. Clara opened her mouth, but stopped. Kareem continued before she could speak. I want it expanded. That landed. Daniel blinked. Clara frowned. Expanded. Daniel repeated. Yes, Kareem said. Integrated into our international projects. Controlled supply chain. Consistent quality. Clara hesitated. That wasn't part of. It is now, he said calmly. Silence. I didn't smile, but I understood.
Completely.
He wasn't just investing in projects. He was reinforcing the foundation. The division stays, I said. Yes, he replied. And grows. Yes. That was the moment. The exact moment. When everything Clara had pushed toward shifted. Not violently. Not dramatically. But irreversibly. Daniel looked between us. This changes everything, he said. Yes, I replied. That's the point. By the time the documents were signed, the room felt different. Not tense. Not uncertain.
Defined. Clear.
When Kareem stood, he looked at me. This works, he said. Yes, I replied. It does. Not hope. Not possibility.
Certainty.
As he left, the room remained quiet for a moment. Then Daniel exhaled. That was different, he said. Yes, I replied. Clara didn't speak right away. When she finally did, her voice was measured. I underestimated you, she said. I looked at her. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction. Just clarity. Yes, I said.
No need to expand on it.
She nodded once. Accepting. Not defeated. Just recalibrating. Daniel turned to me. What happens now? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Now, I said, we work. And we did. 3 months later, I stood in an airport terminal, reviewing project updates on a tablet. The first phase was already ahead of schedule. Coordination was tight. Communication was clean.
Execución exact.
Daniel stood beside me, more focused than I had ever seen him. Not overwhelmed. Not uncertain.
Learning.
Actually learning. Still nervous? He asked. No, I said. Excited. Yes. He smiled. I think I am too. Across from us, Kareem finished a call and walked over. Everything is ready, he said. Good, I replied. We moved toward boarding together. Not as strangers. Not as roles. As partners. As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window, watching the ground fall away beneath us. Just weeks ago, I had been sitting in that same house, questioning whether my time had passed, whether I had anything left to offer, whether I had become irrelevant. I almost smiled, not because everything had worked out, but because I finally understood something I should have known all along. I hadn't been replaced. I had stepped aside, and the moment I stopped doing that, everything changed. Some people think endings come quietly, that they fade into the background. But sometimes, what looks like an ending is just the moment before you return.